Are you a Christian wife wondering how to enjoy intimacy? Are you struggling with the nuance of how to enjoy sex and be a Proverbs 31 woman? You are not alone. And in this video, I want to share with you the things that I have seen in my experience working with Christian women, but also as my experience working with women as they work to increase their levels of intimacy with their spouses. But first, if you're new here, my name is Polly. I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist, and I have been practicing for over 16 years, helping tens of thousands of women stop leaking, enjoy intimacy again, and return to their pre-baby body without Kegels. But the thing that I personally enjoy most is loving the Lord and really wanting to know the things that He says and shares with us, because I want to do what he asks of us. So the reason I want to bring this up to you is because this is such a nuanced thing that I hear all the time. I have so many patients of mine that have waited until marriage for them to become intimate. And then that day happens, they get married, and they're like, I don't understand it. Like, it's very, very difficult for them, and it's kind of stressful. And so one of the pieces of advice that I give to them is that first, understand, yes, you waited, and that was a blessing. And if you didn't wait, there's no judgment here, truly. But either way, even those that don't wait, sometimes this experiencing intimacy and, trying to be a godly woman and a Christian wife, sometimes there's almost a disconnect there. And the reason that I bring this up is because it can really start to impact your marriage. Intimacy, all the forms of intimacy, physically, I'm talking more about here, that's really difficult, because if you waited, you may not really have any idea of the things you're supposed to be doing or practicing or working on, because you're probably scared to go look this up on the internet, but then maybe you don't want to talk about it with your best friends, or maybe your small group, or a trusted lady in your life. I mean, heaven forbid you go talk to your mom about this, or whatever it may be. It can be difficult. And so the quick piece of advice that I'm going to give you here is, I want you to go back to your dating life. I want you to go back and think, okay, here was my line, and what were the activities that I did up to that line, and understand, okay, that was where my line is. But really, where that line is, and then intimacy sits, there's a whole lot of other activities that sit in between there. And the reason I bring that up is because you went from playing, we're just going to assume here that you waited, or maybe the other thing too is you're listening to this like, well, I've never enjoyed intimacy. This is still for you too. This is the same advice that I have given all my patients and clients over the last 16 years. But so going back to, if your line is here and intimacy is here, there's a whole lot of things that you haven't done yet. But the beautiful thing about this is that now, and you can take this, I want you to take it and morph it to what feels right and aligned with you and what you feel comfortable with. But to take it to one end of the spectrum, I want you to take and say, okay, if my line was here, so like we can, and I'm just gonna really exaggerate this to send home this point, but let's say there's no kissing below the neck. That's your line. That was your line prior to dating, or prior to marriage, I should say. So let's say if that's your line, I want you to then say, okay, make a list. Again, I'm exaggerating this. You don't necessarily have to do it exactly this way, but I want you to make a list of, okay, so after like no kissing below the neck, what would be the next step or the next move after that? And then what would be the next step after that? And then what would be the next step after that? And then after that and after that. Have a whole long list of things. Go practice those. And I'm not saying you need to like take that paper and pull it out and just be like, and check. That's probably not the best idea. I mean, you can do whatever you want to, but maybe just have some things that you work on understanding how your body works, the things that work for you, for your body to be in a place to enjoy intimacy together. I know I got to be careful on here with all these words, but there's a certain point where your body needs to start ramping up. And one of the things that I hear all the time is women say, I don't think my body does that. Your body should ramp up. And the advice I give is going back to wherever your line was when you were dating to where physical intimacy is. Practice those things in between there, because that is going to set you up to really help you understand the body that you have been given. And I want to share this scripture with you here. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4, it says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. So if this is something where your marriage really matters to you, which I am sure as you're listening to this, it does, this really illustrates the fact that marriage is pure and that the activities that come with it are pure. And I know that it's such a hard thing for our brains, especially if we've waited, to piece that together and say, okay, well, I waited and I was a good girl and then I got married, and then there is no sense of no idea of what to do. And so kind of working on some of these activities to fill that gap of where your line was when you were married up until like full physical intimacy, go practice all of those. And I strongly believe that you're going to start to notice a huge difference on that front. Now, the next thing I want to give you here on this is to really understand and know that your body was designed for this. Because like I mentioned before, I have lots of patients when I said, okay, your body, as you start kissing and, doing foreplay and all those things, your body should start to ramp up. That's the whole process. And sometimes this is a really difficult thing for women to understand because maybe they have had to put the brakes on before in previous relationships, or they're just not experienced with that. And that is okay. And here's a scripture that I want to read to you about this. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28 says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. And I think that we all know exactly what that is, that God is essentially saying, go be intimate with your spouse, which is such an interesting thing to consider. And I know that when I started really studying about this before I got married a long time ago, that it just was interesting to me, like he's telling me to go and be intimate with my husband. It just was such an interesting idea for me to think about, because that is not what I was taught in Sunday school. My parents didn't talk to me about this. I sure as heck was not talking about this with some of my friends. And so to really understand that this is God's desire for us, that we are designed that way. And if we're created in his image, then it's one of those things to really honor that and say, okay, at the very least, let's go try. So just know your body was designed for this. All right, so the next thing I want to bring up, and this is something that I can absolutely speak on. One, I'll be honest, I have had pelvic pain with intimacy before. I can speak to that. But also, I have helped women with this over the past 16 years where intimacy is painful and it really becomes something that they want to avoid, they don't want to take part in anymore. And here's what I'm going to give you, my little bits of wisdom, being in this career, being the professional and the expert that I am, is that this, I honestly believe, is the devil's way of getting in between a godly marriage. I'm telling you, because if you're not being intimate, which we talked about earlier, we were made for this. He's encouraging us to be intimate with our spouses. And again, these desires, that's part of the creation of the body. So I just want you to know that if that's in place, and then we're now having pain, something is not correct. I can't tell you how many patients I have had that have said, well, I think the reason is because, actually I had one gal that said it's because I didn't wait, I'm being punished. No way, no way. Now here's what I'll briefly tell you real quick. So our pelvic floor, it's not the hammock that everybody always says that it is, that it starts in the front of us and it wraps to the back of us. It's not that string of muscles. It's actually significantly more complex than that. But the way I like to explain it to everybody is that we have a door frame that leads to a hallway that leads to a living room. The hallway is what is supposed to accommodate during intimacy. Again, I have to be careful here. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you can imagine with me, if that hallway is what has to accommodate, those muscles need to be soft and supple. So if you took your bicep at rest and you pressed on it, it would move out of the way. The muscles in that second layer in that hallway, pause this and kind of think about this if you need to. Not that you're not bright, I know, but sometimes this is such a new concept for some. So just think about it. Those muscles should accommodate. But if they are not soft and supple, that is where pain with insertion, with thrusting, or even afterwards, pain of any kind is not okay. And here's what I'll tell you. If you're running and your knee starts to hurt, you're not embarrassed to tell anyone about it, right? But for some reason, when we have pain with intimacy, we're embarrassed to say it. Now, you don't have to be like, so I'm having pain with intimacy, and when he is doing X and I'm doing Y, you don't need to say that at all. You can just say, and I'm not saying you gotta put this on social media, but ask for help. Ask for help. Pain with intimacy is not okay. Again, our bodies were not designed for this. And then I mentioned this already, but in Isaiah 43, chapter 43, verse 7, it says, everyone who is called by my name, who I formed and made. If he made us, we are good. We are good. And there's that other scripture, I'm like the worst at referencing them. That's why I write them down. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. Our bodies are designed to do this. He has commanded it. I shouldn't say commanded, maybe. Depends on how you want to say it. I see this as this is his desire for us to go and multiply and replenish. And what is the activity that helps us multiply and replenish? Intimacy. So I don't know why I whisper that. And if this is something that you are having a struggle with, I would encourage you to reach out. You'll see in the description box that there is a time where you can set up a link where you can set up a time to, you and I can have a chat. I call it your pelvic floor's next step, where you can reach out and we can figure out what your next step is if this is something you're struggling with. There's also a free training on my method if you want it. I try not to gatekeep on too much, so you're welcome to sign up for that as well. But the last thing, as I was preparing for this video, this is something that I found, and I just felt like this is almost like a final blessing to wrap this video up. So here is what here it is. Okay, in Mark chapter 10, verse 9, it says, therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. And I don't know if you're perceiving this as a final blessing for this video, but that's what I'm seeing. God has joined you and your spouse together. And what he does and asks us to do is good. And I strongly believe, I've said this already, that the lack of intimacy in our marriages and relationships or wherever you're sitting, I believe that is of the devil sometimes. And so if this is a way that you can increase your levels of intimacy with your spouse or your partner, that this is a way for you to honor the body that you have, I would really encourage you to consider this. And again, have a look in the description below. Schedule a call with me, and it will always be with me, and have a look at that free training if that interests you. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.